Brilliance Audio presents Killing Season, the unsolved case of New England's deadliest serial killer, by Carlton Smith, performed by John Glushevich. The woman wasn't sure she could make it much farther. She knew she shouldn't have had so much coffee. How long, she wondered, until the next exit. Just the thought of pulling off and finding a restroom seemed to make it worse. Outside, the trees rushed past as her car flew north on State Route 140 outside of New Bedford. She didn't want to stop. People driving around her would wonder why, and probably guess. It would be embarrassing. Women weren't supposed to use the woods for toilets. But the pressure was becoming excruciating. Well, she thought, it's either off to the side of the road or it's have an accident. Succumbing, the woman slowed her car and pulled off on the shoulder of the 4-lane highway. She opened the door of her car and clambered down the brushy embankment. She found a concealed spot in the scrubby trees. That's when she saw the sight that forever afterward would fill her mind every time she headed north on the road from New Bedford. The sightless eyes stared back at her, and the woman knew she would never forget the afternoon of Saturday, July 2nd, 1988. Sergeant Alan Alves was tinkering around on his boat that afternoon when the call came in. Skeletal remains, the word was, just over the Lakeville town line into Freetown's jurisdiction. A woman driving north had stopped to walk her dog. How the cops laughed at that. Along Route 140, and had stumbled over what was left of a human being. 50 yards more. Just 50. Why couldn't the person who left the body have driven just a little farther north? Now Alves would have to go to work on his day off. Alves was the township of Freetown's only detective. He was widely regarded as a no-nonsense cop. A solidly built, darkly complected man with a pockmarked face and a bushy mustache, Alves' tough appearance seemed incongruous with his often humorous demeanor. Alves knew the streets about as well as anyone in southeastern Massachusetts, and he knew the drug scene. But what Alves was most noted for was his grasp of the subtleties of Satanism, or, at least, devil worship as it was practiced in this largely rural portion of the country's second-oldest state. Alves pulled his car off onto the shoulder of the highway, where units from Freetown and the township just to the north, Lakeville, were already gathered. A call had already been made to the Bristol County District Attorney's Office, and experts from the Massachusetts State Police were on their way. The uniformed officers showed Alves the site. It smelled awful. Alves guessed the skeleton had been there rotting away for several months. He was pretty sure the dead person had been a woman. The skeleton lay on its back, eye sockets pointed upward aimlessly. The arms and legs were thrust outward, as if the victim had been spread-eagled by the killer at the moment of death. The reason Alves thought the dead person was a woman was because of the panties bunched and dropped to the side, and the brassiere that was still twisted around the neck. Alves had the impression that the woman had been raped and murdered right here on the spot. Or, maybe, with some of these guys, you could never tell. Maybe she had been murdered, then raped, Alves thought. After the photographs, the light began to fade, so the scene was secured with yellow crime scene tape, and plans were made to return the following day for a more thorough look. A decomposing skeleton is an ugly thing, and it did not occur to Alves for even a second that the stinking, whitening bones he saw before him could ever have been connected to his beautiful, laughing friend, and sometimes undercover informant, Deborah Medeiros of Fall River. A self-admitted prostitute, Debbie was much too alive to ever be dead, at least in Alves' mind. But dead is what Debbie was, although it would be months before anyone realized the bones they were staring at that day were Debbie's. Nor did anyone then realize that the ghastly remnants marked the start of one of the largest manhunts in Massachusetts history, a frantic search that would take years, cost millions, and register the deaths of 10 other young women besides Debbie, along with one suspect and a key witness. It would be a manhunt that would destroy professional and public reputations, torture 11 families with agonizing doubts and bitter hatreds, and, finally, irrevocably demolish what had once been one of the most promising political careers in the Commonwealth called Massachusetts. But all of this was to come with hindsight years later, for Alves and everyone else. By then, though, it would be far too late.